Her scream sliced through the afternoon air just seconds before the chaos erupted. HOA President Deborah Karen Callahan lunged forward, shoving one police officer so hard he stumbled back onto my lawn. The other officer barely had time to react before she swung her purse at him, shouting, "You can't arrest the president of the HOA." Flashing lights strobed across the quiet cul-de-sac neighbors, peeked through curtains, and I just stood there on my porch, coffee cup in hand, watching the woman who'd ruled this neighborhood like a dictator lose every ounce of control she'd ever had. It all started because I dared to tow her SUV off my own driveway, a driveway she claimed belonged to the HOA. I followed the law. She chose war. And in less than 10 minutes, Karen went from issuing fake citations to being cuffed and dragged away in front of the entire block. What none of them knew was that I'd recorded every second, the perfect evidence for what was about to become Maple Ridge's most infamous HOA meltdown. Before we dive in, drop your city and local time in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because you're about to see how karma parks perfectly. When I first moved into my grandmother's old home in Maple Ridge, Colorado, I thought I'd found peace. The house was small, framed by pine trees, and the faint sound of a creek down the hill, the kind of place where you could smell coffee in the morning and hear nothing but birds and the occasional passing car. It was the house I grew up visiting every summer. The house my grandmother Ruth Parker had fought to keep from being swallowed by the ever-expanding homeowners association. She lost that fight years ago. The HOA absorbed the area like a spreading wildfire, and now every fence, flower bed, and front door color needed to be approved. When Grandma passed, the board sent me a sympathy card, signed by the president herself, Deborah Callahan, a 50-something woman with a sharp smile and an even sharper sense of control. People in the neighborhood didn't just call her the HOA president, they called her Karen of the Ridge. The first time I met her, she showed up at my door uninvited. "Welcome to Maple Ridge, Mr. Parker," she said, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. "I hope you've reviewed our community standards." I hadn't. I'd barely unpacked. She pointed to my driveway. "We'll need you to repaint those cracks. The HOA doesn't allow visible fractures. It affects property value." That was my introduction. No, how are you settling in? No nice to have you. Just a warning disguised as politeness. I smiled, nodded, and closed the door before she could inspect the paint color of my mailbox. At first, I thought maybe she was just overly involved. You know, the type who collects rules like trophies. But within a week, her presence became impossible to ignore. One Tuesday morning, I stepped outside to grab my toolbox and froze. A white SUV was parked squarely across my driveway. Brand new, spotless, with a license plate that read HOA 1. I thought, no way. Maybe it was a visitor, a delivery driver. But as I walked closer, I saw the decal on the bumper, "Property of Maple Ridge, HOA." Out came Deborah Heels, clicking sunglasses, glinting like she was walking a red carpet instead of my concrete. "Oh, good morning," she chirped. "Don't mind my car. I'm just doing a perimeter inspection." "Of my driveway?" I asked. She smiled, wide and fake. "Everything inside Maple Ridge is subject to HOA evaluation, Mr. Parker. It's in the charter." I didn't argue. Not yet. I was still the new guy, and part of me wanted to avoid conflict. Maybe she was bluffing. Maybe she'd drive away and never do it again. She didn't. By the third week, it had become routine. Her SUV parked across my driveway like it was her personal office space, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Once she even left a note under my windshield wiper that read, "Driveways are shared visual zones. Keep yours clear for inspections." I laughed. Then I stopped laughing, because the next day I found she'd placed a warning notice in my mailbox, a formal HOA citation, claiming my front yard grass exceeded approved height. I measured it. It was 3 inches. The HOA limit was 4. That was the day I realized this wasn't about grass or cracks or driveways. It was about control. A few days later came the moment that changed everything. I had a major job interview, the kind that could pull me out of debt and start a new chapter. I woke up early, ironed my suit, reviewed my notes, and walked outside, straight into Deja Vu, her SUV, parked, again, right in front of my car, blocking me completely. Deborah wasn't home. I called her number from the HOA directory. No answer. I texted. No reply. 5 minutes passed, 10, then 20. My stomach churned as the minutes bled into panic. Finally, I ordered an Uber. By the time I arrived at the office, I was 20 minutes late and soaked in sweat. The receptionist gave me a look that said it all. They'd already moved on to the next candidate. That was it. That was the moment something inside me clicked. I went home, logged on to the Jefferson County Ordinance's website, and spent 3 hours reading about private property rights, towing regulations, and signage requirements. If Deborah wanted to play legal games, I'd beat her by following the law better than she ever could. The next morning, I installed a steel sign right beside my driveway: private driveway, no parking. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. I even made sure the font size met the county's minimum visibility standard. Then I set up my new doorbell camera, angled perfectly toward the driveway. For good measure, I emailed the HOA board, including Deborah, with a polite but firm message. This driveway is private property, as listed in the deed transfer dated April 16. Future unauthorized parking will result in towing according to Jefferson County Code 5-123. She replied 2 hours later, "I am the HOA. You don't make the rules here." I didn't respond. I just waited. 2 days later, the waiting ended. I came home from work, and there it was again, the white SUV gleaming in the sun like a taunt. Except this time she'd left a piece of cardboard on the dashboard. Written in thick black marker, "You don't own the street, Nicholas. I'll park wherever I want." That was the moment I called Caleb Brooks, a tow operator recommended by the county sheriff's website. I showed him the sign, the photos, and my proof of ownership. He nodded once and said, "Looks perfectly legal." 10 minutes later, the hook was under her SUV. 15 minutes later, her throne was gone. For the first time in weeks, my driveway looked like my driveway again. I remember standing there in the sunlight, coffee in hand, feeling something close to victory. I even smiled. But peace never lasts long when you live next to an HOA Karen. 45 minutes later, I heard shouting from the street, shrill, furious shouting. Deborah was storming across my lawn, waving her arms like she was conducting an orchestra of rage. "You stole HOA property," she screamed. "Your car was towed legally, Mrs. Callahan," I said calmly, holding up the tow slip. She snatched it, crumpled it in her hand, and threw it at my feet. "You think you can defy me? I run this community. I'll have your house condemned if I have to." I took a sip of coffee. "Then I suggest you start with a building permit, Karen." That was when she completely lost it. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and shouted loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear, "This man stole my vehicle. I'm the HOA president. Arrest him now." I almost laughed. Grand Theft Auto, really. But within minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled up the streetlights, flashing sirens cutting through the summer air. Officer James Ramirez stepped out first, followed by Officer Megan Chen. Both of them looked tired, like they'd seen this kind of thing before. "Afternoon, folks," Ramirez said. "Can someone explain what's going on?" Deborah started first, of course. "He illegally towed HOA property. He's a threat to the community." Officer Chen looked at me. "Sir, your name?" "Nicholas Parker." The car was parked on my private driveway. I followed county law and have documentation. I handed them the tow, slipped the deed copy, and even my phone with footage from the doorbell cam. Ramirez scrolled for 20 seconds, then turned the screen toward Chen. They both nodded. "Everything checks out, ma'am," Ramirez said to Deborah. "This is private property." He acted within his rights. Deborah's jaw dropped. No, you don't understand. I am the HOA. I can park anywhere I need to," Ma'am Chen said carefully. "The HOA doesn't override property law." And that's when it happened, the moment that started the video you've already seen. Deborah's face turned red, then purple. She screamed something about corruption and conspiracies, stepped forward, and shoved Officer Chen square in the shoulder. Ramirez moved to restrain her, but she swung her purse at him, connecting with his arm. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," he shouted. "No, you can't do this to me." The sound of cuffs snapping shut was louder than I expected. The neighborhood was silent, except for Deborah's voice still shouting as she was led to the cruiser. That was the day HOA Karen met the law, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, Maple Ridge looked like a crime scene draped in gossip. Every front porch whispered, every curtain twitched, and every group text in the neighborhood lit up like wildfire. The mighty Deborah Karen Callahan, queen of HOA law and order, had been handcuffed in broad daylight and taken away screaming. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop. Notifications missed, calls unread, messages, all from neighbors I barely knew. Some were sympathetic. Others were curious. And a few, unsurprisingly, were furious that I had embarrassed the HOA president. Man said Gary Thompson, the guy across the street, when I opened my door. "You're the talk of the neighborhood. I think even the mailman knows." He held up his phone grinning. "You're trending on Nextdoor." And he wasn't kidding. The clip of Deborah attacking the police officers, the same video Gary had recorded from his porch, was already circulating in local forums. Someone had titled it, "HOA President Goes Full Karen Assaults Cops Over Driveway Dispute." Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, half the neighborhood cheering, the other half terrified. I scrolled through them and saw everything from "she had it coming" to "this is what happens when power gets to your head." One even said, "Finally, someone stood up to her." I should have felt good, vindicated, but all I felt was unsettled, because I knew Deborah, someone that entitled, wouldn't go down quietly. Sure enough, 2 hours later, I saw a car pull up, a silver sedan with Maple Ridge HOA printed on the side. Out stepped Paul Bennett, the treasurer of the HOA, holding a clipboard and looking uncomfortable. He waved politely. "Morning, Nicholas. Mind if we talk?" I leaned on my porch railing. "If this is about last night, I've already spoken to the police." He nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Yeah, we heard. The board's holding an emergency meeting tonight about everything." Everything meaning Deborah. He hesitated. "Technically, she's still president, but well after the arrest, we're reviewing her status." I smirked. "Guess she finally violated one of her own bylaws." Paul actually chuckled, then immediately looked guilty. "Don't quote me on that." That evening, the HOA meeting was chaos. Every seat in the community center was filled, people standing against the walls, phones, recording tension so thick you could almost see it shimmer under the fluorescent lights. At the front of the room sat the remaining board members, Paul Sophie Reynolds, the secretary, and Hazel Nelson, the vice president who'd been mostly invisible until now. Deborah's seat was empty, her nameplate still gleaming like a ghost of authority. Hazel cleared her throat. "Let's begin. As you all know, President Callahan was involved in an altercation yesterday." Someone in the back yelled. "She attacked the cops." Hazel raised a hand for silence. "We're aware of that, and while the legal process unfolds, we are suspending her duties effective immediately." The room erupted, some applauding, some shouting, one guy muttering that Deborah was framed. Hazel kept her composure, speaking firmly, but without Deborah's signature condescension. "Moving forward, we will appoint an interim president until further notice." I leaned back, arms crossed, watching this mini-revolution play out. Hazel glanced at me, once her eyes sharp, but not unkind, the look of someone who'd seen too much and wanted peace back in her neighborhood. After the meeting, as people dispersed, Hazel approached me. "Mr. Parker," she said, "I just want to personally thank you for keeping calm yesterday. You did everything by the book." I smiled faintly. "That's the only way to win against people like her." Hazel nodded. "You'd be surprised how many people in this HOA forget that rules apply to them too." She handed me her card. "If Deborah or anyone from her family contacts you, call me, or the police." That was the first time I realized how deep this mess went, that Deborah wasn't just some cranky neighbor. She was someone who'd built her own little empire under the HOA's banner, and I had just cracked its foundation. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Someone left anonymous notes in my mailbox. "You'll regret crossing her. You don't belong here. Watch your back, Parker." My trash bins were knocked over twice. My mailbox flag was bent. Someone even poured detergent across my front lawn, killing a long stripe of grass like a chemical scar. I filed a report with Officer Ramirez, who now knew me by name. He sighed when he saw the photos. "Let me guess you think it's her," I shrugged. "She's in custody, right?" He gave me a look. "Released on bond. Yesterday." The words hit like a punch. "She's out." "Yep, $375, 000 bond." Her family must have scrambled fast. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. I checked the doorbell camera twice, 3 times. At 1, 2, 7 a.m. It finally pinged, movement detected. I opened the feed and froze. It was her, Deborah, standing in the middle of my driveway, arms folded, staring directly into the camera. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. After 20 seconds, she raised her hand and pointed at the sign that said, "Private driveway, no parking." Then she walked away. The next morning, I showed the footage to Ramirez. He looked exhausted but unsurprised. Technically, she didn't trespass, not yet. But keep documenting everything. So I did. For days, I collected screenshots, recordings, timestamps. The HOA board sent an official notice declaring Deborah temporarily suspended, but she refused to accept it. In fact, she started sending her own official letters, forged documents, stamped with the HOA logo, declaring that I owed $1 200 inches community violation fees for harassment of the board. Hazel called me personally when she found out. "Those letters are illegal. We'll file a cease and desist." But Deborah wasn't stopping. She was unraveling. Then came the most surreal day of all, the court hearing for her assault charges. I was called as a witness. When I walked into the courtroom, she was already there, sitting beside her public defender, glaring daggers at me across the aisle. Her once perfect hair was limp. Her signature pearl necklace was gone. But that smug defiance, still there, buried under a layer of humiliation. The prosecutor, ADA Thomas Grady, presented the case like clockwork. Body cam footage, my testimony, Gary's video, even Deborah's own screaming 911 call. The courtroom gasped when they played the clip of her shoving Officer Chen. Her lawyer tried to spin it. My client was emotionally distressed, acting out of panic. Panic doesn't justify assault, the judge interrupted. When it was my turn to testify, I stood straight, hands folded, and told the truth. Every detail. Calm, factual. I didn't add venom, didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any revenge ever could. By the end, Judge Marcia Whitaker looked over her glasses and said, "Given the nature of this offense, and the defendant's prior record, bail remains set at $375,000. This court will not tolerate abuse of authority, whether it comes from a public office or a homeowners association." Deborah's face went white. When the gavel came down, it felt like a thunderclap of karma. Outside, the courthouse reporters from the local station were waiting. Microphones, cameras, questions flying everywhere. "Mr. Parker, do you have any comment on what happened? Do you think HOA presidents have too much power?" I didn't say much, just one line before getting in my car. Power isn't the problem, entitlement is. That night, for the first time in weeks, I sat on my porch listening to the crickets, the wind, and the silence Deborah had left behind. It was peaceful, too peaceful, because something in my gut told me this wasn't over yet, and I was right. The next morning, a large envelope was taped to my front door. Inside was a printed notice, no return address, bearing the HOA logo again. Only this time, the message was short, bold, and chilling. "HOA Karen always comes back." I stared at it for a long time, the early sun bleeding across the paper like fire through frost. I stood there on my porch, the morning breeze lifting the edges of the envelope, the bold letters still staring at me. "Oh, Karen always comes back." The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe it was because of the timing, right when I finally thought peace had returned. Or maybe it was because deep down I knew Deborah Callahan wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat. She didn't believe in losing. She believed in revenge. I took the letter inside, laid it flat on the kitchen counter, and noticed the detail that made my stomach twist. The HOA seal wasn't just printed, it was stamped. A real embossed seal like the ones only board officers were supposed to have, meaning someone still loyal to her had helped. And that meant the war wasn't over. By noon, I was sitting across from Hazel Nelson, the new interim HOA president at the Maple Ridge Community Office. Her hair was neatly tied back her desk, a battlefield of folders, legal notices, and half-drunk coffee cups. When I slid the letter toward her, she sighed, rubbing her temples. "God, I was afraid of this." "She still got people inside?" I asked. Hazel nodded slowly. Deborah had a few loyal board members, Paul Bennett for one. She gave them favors, bent rules for them, even waived late fees. That kind of loyalty doesn't vanish overnight. "So what's the plan?" She leaned forward, her voice low. "The board is meeting tomorrow to make her suspension permanent. But if she's sending out letters again, she's already violated the terms of her bail. The sheriff's office will want to see this." "Then they will," I said, sliding the letter back into its envelope. "I'm done playing defense." That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight crawled across the floorboards, and every little sound made me tense. I'd set up motion alerts on the doorbell camera, but the notifications stayed quiet. Too quiet. Around 2 a.m., a faint sound jolted me, not from the doorbell, but from the garage. A metallic clang, followed by the scrape of something heavy being dragged. My heart jumped. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera feed, nothing. The driveway was empty. But inside, something shifted again. A soft thump. I moved quietly through the hallway, barefoot on cold tile, listening. When I reached the garage door, I flicked the light switch. Nothing. The bulb was gone. I turned on my phone flashlight, and there it was, the HOA seal, freshly spray-painted in red across the inside of my garage door. Beneath it, 3 words, "Get out, lawbreaker." I stepped back, pulse hammering. Whoever did it was long gone. But the message was clear. This wasn't random vandalism. It was personal. The next morning, Officer Ramirez stood in the driveway, arms crossed, inspecting the red paint like he'd seen this movie before. "She's escalating," he muttered. "You think she did it herself?" He shrugged. "Could have been her. Could have been one of her disciples. Either way, this isn't just harassment now. This is intimidation." He pulled a small evidence bag from his pocket, slipped a fragment of red spray can nozzle inside, and nodded to Officer Chen, who was snapping photos. We'll file this under criminal mischief and witness tampering, Ramirez said. If she's linked, her bond will be revoked immediately. Good, I thought. Maybe this would finally end it. But later that evening, when I came home from work, another envelope was wedged under my door. Same seal, same heavy paper. Inside a single printed page. You made me lose everything. My title, my home, my name. But Maple Ridge still belongs to me. You'll see. There was no signature. But the scent of her floral perfume, that same overpowering gardenia she used to wear at every HOA meeting, was unmistakable. 2 days later, Hazel called me in a rush. Nicholas, you need to come to the HOA office right now. I drove over, heart pounding. When I walked in, she was pacing in front of the copier holding a manila folder full of documents. She's filed a civil complaint against you, Hazel said, eyes wide. Through the HOA, using old letterhead she forged. I blinked. What kind of complaint? She claims you violated community cohesion regulations by removing HOA signage without approval. Hazel tossed the paper onto the desk. She's saying your tow sign was unauthorized and caused mental distress to board members. I couldn't help but laugh. Mental distress. She tried to punch a cop. Hazel didn't smile. Nicholas, this is serious. She's using the HOA legal structure to harass you. We're getting reports she's been emailing residents under the subject line, Reclaim the Ridge. I exhaled slowly. So now she's building her own little army. Hazel nodded. I'm working with our attorney to issue a permanent removal order from the HOA board. Once it's official, she won't be able to claim any authority again. But until then, we're exposed. That word exposed lingered. Because that weekend, it got worse. On Saturday morning, I woke to a commotion outside. When I looked out my window, I saw 3 people standing on my lawn hammering something into the ground. I stormed out in disbelief. Hey, what do you think you're doing? One of them, a heavy-set man in a blue polo, didn't even look up. Just following orders from the president, buddy. I glanced down at the sign they were planting, property under HOA review, unauthorized structure. Take that down, I snapped. Call the board if you've got a problem. I am calling the board, I said, grabbing my phone. Within minutes, Hazel arrived, her face pale with fury. She didn't even need to ask. She walked straight to the men, flashing her badge as acting president. This is a cease and desist situation. You're trespassing on private property. Remove that sign now, or I'll call the sheriff myself. The men hesitated, muttered something about Deborah's orders, and left. Hazel turned to me, shaking her head. She's coordinating people behind the scenes, she said, and she's convincing them she's been reinstated. It's delusion mixed with authority, a dangerous combination. I'm starting to think she's lost her mind. Hazel looked grim. She lost that weeks ago. Now she's just trying to drag everyone down with her. That night I decided I'd had enough. I spent 3 hours compiling every piece of evidence I had, photos, videos, emails, even the perfume-scented letters. I organized it all into a neat digital folder labeled Operation HOA Karen. Then I sent it to Ada Thomas Grady, the same prosecutor handling her assault case. His reply came the next morning, received. This may constitute witness harassment and bail violation. Expect follow-up. By noon, I got a call from Officer Ramirez again. We've got a warrant, he said. We're picking her up tonight. That sentence felt like air after suffocation. When evening fell, I saw the police cars roll past my house toward the end of the street, Deborah's End. The flashing lights painted the houses red and blue again, and for a moment I felt the same rush as the night it all started. I watched from my porch as officers led her out, still dressed impeccably, still shouting about injustice and fraudulent leadership. But there was something different this time. She wasn't furious. She was smiling. It sent a chill straight through me. The next day, Hazel called. They've taken her in. Her bond's been revoked. She's being held until trial. I finally exhaled. Good. Maybe now the Ridge can breathe again. Hazel hesitated. Nicholas, there's one more thing. When they arrested her, they found a file in her house, labeled with your name. It had printed photos of your home, your car, even your mailbox. Dozens of them. I sat down slowly. What the hell was she planning? We don't know. But whatever it was, it's over now. For good. Or so we thought. Because a week later, the Maple Ridge newsletter arrived in everyone's mailbox, unsigned, no official header, no credits, just a single page typed in all caps, "The HOA is forever, and so am I." I stared at it for a long moment, the echo of sirens and shouting replaying in my mind. Maybe Deborah Callahan was gone, but HOA Karen, her legend, had just begun. When the anonymous newsletter hit every doorstep in Maple Ridge, the whole neighborhood froze like someone had dropped a ghost in their mailbox. The paper was plain cheap printer stock, no signature, no HOA logo, but the message in blocky black letters screamed through every living room, "The HOA is forever, and so am I." Even the calmest neighbors started locking their gates. You could feel it in the air, tension, fear, and curiosity all tangled together. I wasn't scared, at least not at first. I was angry. Angry that even behind bars, Deborah Karen Callahan could still infect this neighborhood with her arrogance. I walked outside that morning to find Gary Thompson pacing by his mailbox holding the same flyer. "She's in jail," he said. "So how the hell did she pull this off?" That was the question everyone asked. Hazel called an emergency meeting within 24 hours. This time the meeting wasn't just the HOA board, it was half the neighborhood all squeezed into the community hall, their voices rising like static. Hazel stood at the front looking paler than usual, a folder in her hands. "We've confirmed," she said, "that these letters didn't come through the HOA office. Whoever mailed them used our residents' addresses from an old database that Deborah had unauthorized access to." The crowd erupted. "She had our info at home. She's spying on us." "I told you that woman was crazy," Hazel raised her voice, trying to maintain control. "We've turned the information over to the sheriff's department. They're investigating how she sent the newsletters while incarcerated. It's possible she had help." I didn't need to guess. Deborah had allies, people who still believed in her vision for Maple Ridge. To them, she wasn't a criminal. She was a crusader. That night, my doorbell camera caught something I didn't expect. Around 1:45 p.m., a car pulled up, dark blue sedan headlights off. The driver stepped out wearing a hoodie and gloves, placed a small object in my mailbox, and drove away without saying a word. I waited until morning to check. Inside the mailbox was a USB flash drive wrapped in duct tape. No note, no clue. I didn't want to plug it in on my main computer. It felt like something straight out of a thriller. So I grabbed my old laptop, disconnected the Wi-Fi, and opened it. The folder inside was titled Maple Ridge, Internal. My stomach dropped when I saw the contents. Scanned HOA documents, private emails, even meeting transcripts, years of files Deborah must have stolen or copied while she was president. At the top of the list, one folder stood out, Parker Case. I opened it. Inside were screenshots of my emails, photos of my house, my family's property deed, everything from the first day I moved in. One document stopped me cold, a draft letter to the county assessor requesting a reclassification of parcel boundaries for community oversight. Signed, President Deborah Callahan. She had tried to legally reclassify my driveway and several others under HOA jurisdiction months before our first confrontation. If she'd succeeded, my towing action would have been illegal. She'd been planning to take control of my property long before she ever parked there. Hazel's voice echoed in my head. "You'd be surprised how many people in this HOA forget that rules apply to them too." I called her immediately. She arrived 20 minutes later, storming in like a detective. When I showed her the files, she went pale. This is evidence," she said quietly. She was trying to expand HOA boundaries without the board's vote. "That's fraud." I nodded. "And someone helped her collect this. She couldn't have printed or mailed anything from jail." Hazel looked at the timestamp on the newsletters. They were all postmarked 3 days ago. The same day Paul Bennett visited her. Paul, the treasurer, who'd stayed suspiciously quiet since Deborah's arrest. Hazel exhaled sharply. "We need to act fast." The next day she arranged a meeting with the county investigator assigned to Deborah's case. His name was Detective Ryan Colby, a tall man with a calm, weary look, like he'd been dealing with HOA feuds for far too long. He flipped through the printed files I'd given him, his eyebrows tightening. "This is serious. If she altered property boundaries, that's a federal matter. And if Bennett's helping her, that's conspiracy to commit fraud." Hazel frowned. "What happens if it's true? Then Maple Ridge isn't just dealing with an HOA scandal," Colby said. "You're sitting on a full-blown criminal enterprise." I couldn't believe it. Our quiet, picturesque neighborhood, the kind of place where retirees waved from their lawns, was now ground zero for a fraud investigation. Over the next week, deputies interviewed board members, subpoenaed HOA financial records, and even visited the local post office to track the newsletter's origin. Every day someone new was whispering about subpoenas, forged checks, and hidden accounts. And then out of nowhere, Paul Bennett vanished. He stopped showing up to meetings. His house was dark blinds, closed car gone. Hazel called his phone, no answer. His wife claimed he'd gone on a business trip, but her eyes told a different story. The same night Paul disappeared, Hazel's office was broken into. The only thing missing, the backup hard drive containing HOA records from Deborah's presidency. It didn't take a detective to see the pattern. A week later, I was at home when Officer Ramirez called. Parker, you'll want to sit down. We found Bennett's car, where abandoned near the county line. Inside there were HOA documents and several letters addressed to Deborah at the county jail. Looks like he was her courier. I sighed. So she really was running the HOA from her cell. Not anymore, Ramirez said. They're moving her to a federal holding facility while the fraud case expands. But there's more. You might want to come down to the station. When I arrived, he handed me a sealed plastic bag. Inside was a printed photo, creased and water-stained. It showed my house taken from across the street, and on the back scrawled in pen, "He doesn't deserve Maple Ridge." I looked up at Ramirez. This was in Bennett's car. He nodded. You were right from the start. She wasn't just trying to control the HOA. She wanted your property. It clicked all at once. The driveway fights the fake citations, the arrogance. Deborah hadn't just wanted authority. She wanted ownership. She wanted to make Maple Ridge hers, one parcel at a time. A month later, the official charges dropped: fraudulent misrepresentation, conspiracy to commit mail, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Deborah Callahan was facing up to 10 years in federal prison. Paul Bennett took a plea deal. The day of her sentencing, Hazel invited me to the courthouse. I didn't want to go, but curiosity got the better of me. Deborah looked nothing like the pristine president I'd met months ago. Her hair was gray at the roots, her once flawless posture bent under the weight of a prison uniform. Yet when she saw me, she smiled, cold, controlled, still the same woman who thought she ruled this town. Before the judge read her sentence, she turned to the courtroom and spoke. I built Maple Ridge, she said, her voice trembling but still commanding, and I will not be remembered as a criminal. I only wanted order because people like him, she pointed at me, think they're above it. Her attorney whispered for her to stop, but she didn't. I made this place beautiful. Without me, it will fall apart. The judge cut her off. You made this place fearful, Miss Callahan. There's a difference. 10 years. No parole for the first 5. When the gavel fell, the courtroom exhaled like a storm breaking. Hazel squeezed my shoulder as we left. It's over, she said. But as I walked through the courthouse doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. Because power, like Deborah's, doesn't die, it lingers. And when I got home that evening, waiting in my mailbox was a fresh envelope. No stamp, no address, just 2 words written in black ink, still here. The handwriting was hers. The ink was still wet. And for the first time in months, I realized even when the HOA falls, Karen never truly leaves. For days after Deborah's sentencing, Maple Ridge felt unnervingly calm. Too calm. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, it means something's waiting. The mailboxes stood empty. No more HOA memos. No anonymous flyers. No notes slipped under doors. The lawns grew wild again, fences lost their perfect symmetry, and for once nobody cared. The neighborhood had started healing. At least that's what we wanted to believe. Hazel, now officially elected as president of the reformed Maple Ridge HOA, began rebuilding the board with transparent meetings and open votes. She even formed a new committee to review every past policy Deborah had written, half of which turned out to be unconstitutional, illegal, or just plain ridiculous. I attended one of those meetings out of curiosity. Hazel stood at the front, papers spread before her, and read aloud. Section 12B, residents must repaint mailboxes every 3 months to preserve uniformity. The crowd laughed. Someone shouted, only Karen would make a law like that. Hazel smiled faintly. Well, that law, and everyone like it, is hereby repealed. The room erupted into applause. For a moment, Maple Ridge felt human again. After the meeting, Hazel approached me. She said, if you ever want to join the new board, there's a seat open. I chuckled. Appreciate it, but I think I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime. She laughed, but there was something in her eyes, something uneasy. Yeah, me too. I didn't think much of it until 3 days later when things started getting strange again. It began with the security cameras. One morning I checked my phone and noticed the doorbell cam had gone offline. No alerts, no live feed. Just a static error message, device not connected. I thought it was a power issue, so I went outside. The wiring was intact, but the camera's lens had been covered with something. I peeled it off and froze. It was a printed photo of Deborah cut from an old newspaper article about her sentencing, taped neatly over the lens. Her eyes, even in print, seemed to stare right at me. My hands tightened around the photo. No way, I muttered. She's locked up. But then, as I turned it over, I saw scrawled words on the back in black marker, still here. Same handwriting, same ink style as before. I took the photo straight to Officer Ramirez, who looked at it, sighed, and muttered, You've got to be kidding me. She's in federal custody, I said. She can't possibly. Maybe not her, he interrupted. But someone's keeping her spirit alive. Her spirit, that's one word for it. He leaned back in his chair. We've seen it before. Followers, copycats, obsessed neighbors. They think they're finishing her mission. You'd be surprised how many people idolize power, even toxic power. I wanted to believe it was just some bored idiot trying to scare me. But when I drove home that night, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Deborah's white SUV. Parked 2 blocks down, engine off, headlights dark. The same make, same custom plate, HOA 1. I slowed down, squinting. It couldn't be hers. The original had been seized as part of the investigation. But this one looked identical down to the small crack on the rear bumper. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo, zooming in on the windshield. A note sat under the wiper. Property inspection. Authorized by Maple Ridge HOA. I could almost hear her smug voice saying it. By the time I got out of my car, the SUV's headlights flashed twice, and then it drove off. Hazel didn't believe it at first. Nicholas, that car was impounded. It can't be hers. I'm telling you, I said, sliding my phone across the table. That's her license plate. She stared at the photo for a long time. Then someone's mocking her, or you. We decided to check the HOA archives the next day. That's when Hazel discovered something chilling. The HOA vehicle registry, the one Deborah had personally managed, listed 2 identical SUVs registered under HOA operations fleet. The second vehicle had been temporarily reassigned to a regional compliance officer 2 months before Deborah's arrest. The signature on that reassignment, hers, meaning she'd created a duplicate, a ghost car, to keep operating even after she was gone. Hazel rubbed her temples. She planned this. She knew she might get caught, so she made sure her presence would linger. We filed another report with the sheriff attaching the plate number and Deborah's original documentation. Ramirez promised to track it, but by the next morning that SUV was parked outside Hazel's house. When I arrived, the scene looked like something out of a horror movie. Hazel stood in her driveway, phone in one hand, HOA files clutched in the other. The SUV sat motionless, headlights off, windows tinted black. "She's taunting us," Hazel whispered. "Did you see who was driving?" She shook her head. "No one got out, it just appeared." We called Ramirez again, who arrived 15 minutes later. By then the car was gone. He frowned, tapping his notepad. No tire marks, no prints, no surveillance from nearby homes. It's like it vanished. Or like someone who knows every blind spot in Maple Ridge drove it, I said. Hazel looked at me, realization dawning. Deborah designed the neighborhood's camera placement maps. She knows exactly where the HOA's security coverage ends. And then she whispered something I'll never forget. She built this place to watch people. Now someone's using her system to watch us. Over the next week, small, eerie signs kept popping up. Residents started receiving HOA notices, again typed on official letterhead, signed President D. Callahan. The problem, the new HOA hadn't printed a single letter. One homeowner, Mr. Gordon, said he got a fine for failure to water lawn properly. Another got a warning for loud nighttime activity. The timestamps matched the nights when that phantom SUV had been seen circling the streets. Hazel called an emergency assembly. We packed into the hall, the tension thick enough to choke on. She held up one of the forged notices. "These are not from us," she declared. "Someone is impersonating the HOA and possibly accessing our old databases." From the back, a nervous voice spoke up. Then maybe she was right. Maybe the HOA is forever. Laughter rippled, but no one was really laughing. Hazel's hands trembled as she added, "We're contacting state authorities. Until then, all HOA operations are suspended." That night, Maple Ridge officially went dark, no board, no oversight, no structure, just fear. The following evening, I came home to find a package on my porch. No return address, no postage. Inside was a small flash drive and a note. "For your records, you missed something." I plugged it into my spare laptop. A single video file appeared, time-stamped 3 weeks prior, the day Deborah was transferred to federal custody. The footage showed the inside of a car, someone wearing gloves driving at night. The camera panned toward the passenger seat, and there she was, Deborah, sitting calmly, smiling. She looked straight into the lens. "You can tow my car, Nicholas, but you'll never tow my authority." Then she laughed, a slow, chilling sound before the video cut to static. My hands went numb. The timestamp didn't lie. That video was filmed after she was supposed to be transferred, after she should have been behind bars. I called Ramirez immediately. He came within the hour, watched the footage twice, then looked at me, expression unreadable. "You said she's in federal custody, right?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "Then we need to verify that." The next morning, Ramirez called back. "You might want to sit down," he said. "She's gone. What transferred between facilities 2 days before you got that letter? Somewhere between county and federal transport, the paperwork got mixed up. Nobody knows where she is." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "You're telling me Deborah Callahan, our HOA Karen, escaped?" "She didn't escape," he said grimly. "She vanished. That night I didn't sleep. None of us did. Because as midnight crept over Maple Ridge, the doorbell camera flickered back online for the first time in days. A figure stood at the edge of my driveway, half hidden by the shadows. Tall, blonde, wearing a blazer. She looked up at the camera, smiled, and whispered barely audible over the static, "Miss me." The feed went dark. And for the first time I realized, maybe the HOA wasn't cursed because of its rules. Maybe it was cursed because of her. The next morning, Maple Ridge woke up to hysteria. Someone had leaked the news. Deborah Karen Callahan wasn't in federal custody anymore. Hazel called me before sunrise, her voice shaking. "Nicholas, turn on the TV. Channel 9. I flipped it on, and there it was. Deborah's mugshot plastered across the screen under the headline, "HOA, President Missing During Federal Transfer." The anchor's voice was steady but urgent. "Authorities are investigating the disappearance of former Maple Ridge HOA President Deborah Callahan, who vanished during a transfer from county to federal detention. The vehicle arrived empty, and the 2 marshals assigned to her transport have been placed on administrative leave. The FBI is now involved." Hazel whispered through the phone. "They lost her, Nicholas." "How do you even lose her?" I didn't have an answer. All I could think of was that video, the one where she looked straight into the camera and said, "You'll never tow my authority." She'd planned this. Somehow, from the moment she was arrested, she'd been several moves ahead. By noon, Maple Ridge was swarming with law enforcement. Patrol cars lined the streets, federal agents questioned residents, and a helicopter circled above the HOA office. Hazel and I were called to the community center for interviews. When I walked in, Detective Ryan Colby, the same investigator from before, was already there, sleeves rolled up, coffee in hand. "Parker," he greeted me, his tone clipped. "We need to talk about that footage you found." He played the video on a small monitor. Deborah, calm and composed, smiling at the camera. "Where exactly did this flash drive come from again?" "Left on my porch," I said. "No fingerprints, no note, except a warning." Colby nodded. We traced the video metadata. It was filmed inside a 2021 white SUV registered to the Maple Ridge HOA, the same vehicle that's been stalking the neighborhood. Hazel stiffened beside me. "You found it." Colby's jaw clenched. "Not yet. But we found the GPS tracker that was supposed to be on it. It was removed manually. Whoever did this knows our systems." Hazel rubbed her forehead. "Because Deborah built them." "Exactly." That night, the town's paranoia boiled over. Every dog bark sounded like a warning. Every flickering light felt like a sign. I kept the blinds closed and the lights off, watching through the crack of my curtains. Across the street, Gary Thompson's porch light flicked 3 times, then went dark. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Still protecting them, Nicholas. You always were so noble." My throat went dry. No name, but I didn't need one. Before I could reply, another message popped up. "Check your garage." I grabbed a flashlight and moved slowly through the house, heart pounding. The air inside felt heavy charged, like static before a storm. When I opened the garage door, the smell hit me first, sweet floral cloying. Gardenia, the same perfume Deborah always wore. On the hood of my truck sat a small glass bottle filled with clear liquid. A label on the side read HOA Compliance Notice. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Hands trembling, I pulled it out. "Congratulations, Mr. Parker. You've been promoted. President of nothing." The handwriting was unmistakable. I called Hazel immediately, but she didn't answer. I tried again, and this time her voicemail picked up, calm, professional, completely unaware of what was unfolding. "Hazel, call me back the moment you get this. She's here." 5 minutes later, I saw movement across the street. Someone was standing in Hazel's front yard, half hidden in the shadows. Tall, blonde. My stomach dropped. I rushed outside, but by the time I crossed the street, the figure was gone. Hazel's door was wide open. Inside, the living room was wrecked papers, scattered drawers overturned, HOA binders ripped open. On the dining table, a single envelope waited. It was addressed to me. "Nicholas, you were never the hero. You were the variable I didn't account for. But don't worry. Every community needs balance. You took my crown. Now you'll wear it. D.C." I stood there staring at it when I heard a faint groan from the hallway. "Hazel." She was slumped against the wall, dazed but alive, a bruise forming on her temple. She broke in, Hazel whispered. Said she needed her files back. I tried to stop her. Where did she go? Hazel shook her head. I don't know. She took something, a folder labeled expansion plans. Expansion, it's her master file, Hazel said weakly. She drew up blueprints for annexing nearby neighborhoods under HOA control. If she gets that approved, she can rebuild Maple Ridge, I finished. Hazel grabbed my wrist, her voice trembling. You have to stop her. By the next morning, the whole county knew. Deborah wasn't just missing, she was active. Police found the duplicate SUV abandoned near an unfinished housing development on the edge of town. Inside were dozens of documents, fake IDs, copies of HOA, bylaws, maps marked with red X's. At the center of every map was Maple Ridge. Detective Colby showed me one of them in his office. She's trying to reclaim the HOA structure, he said. We think she's targeting the developers who used to work with her people who owe her favors. She's not just running, I said. She's rebuilding. He nodded grimly. Which is why we're moving you and Miss Nelson into temporary protective custody. You're both on her list. I didn't argue. I was too tired to argue. But deep down, I knew Deborah wouldn't stop until she saw me humiliated. That's what it had always been about. Not rules, not property. Control. And she'd lost it to me. That night, as I packed a small bag, the phone rang. Hazel's number. Hey, I said, I'm almost ready. The officers are coming too, a voice interrupted me. Not Hazel's. You really should have taken her advice, Nicholas. My blood froze. Deborah. She chuckled softly. Hazel was right about one thing: you don't understand power. You think justice and order are the same thing? They're not. Where are you closer than you think? And then she hung up. I bolted outside, scanning the street. Nothing. The air was still thick with that same floral scent. Then my phone buzzed again, one more text. Look behind you. I turned slowly. Across the street, Hazel's house was burning. Flames licked the walls, windows shattered outward, alarms blaring through the night. I sprinted forward, shouting her name, but the fire was too strong. Within minutes, the entire structure was engulfed. The firefighters arrived, dragging hoses and shouting orders, but all I could hear was the crackle of wood and the echo of Deborah's laughter in my mind. Later, when the smoke cleared, investigators found something in the ashes. Not Hazel's body. Thank God she'd escaped through the back door, but a single metal object half melted in the debris. A badge, the old HOA president's pin. Somehow it had survived. Ramirez held it up under his flashlight, frowning. You know what this means? I nodded. Yeah, she's not burning the HOA down. She's rebaptizing it. The next day I woke to an email from an untraceable address. Welcome to your new position, Mr. Parker, HOA President Maple Ridge, reinstated by unanimous vote. See you at the next meeting. Attached was a photo. My house, taken from across the street. And in the window, reflection just barely visible, was her face, smiling, watching, waiting. For the first time since this all began, I wasn't sure if Maple Ridge could ever be saved, because Deborah Karen Callahan didn't just run a homeowners association, she'd built a cult, and somehow, even after the system took her crown, she'd found a way to wear it again. I didn't sleep that night. Her email kept replaying in my head like a broken record. Welcome to your new position, Mr. Parker. HOA president reinstated by unanimous vote. It was absurd, impossible. There was no board left, no quorum, no vote. Hazel was in hiding. The sheriff had shut down the HOA temporarily, and half the neighborhood wanted to dissolve it entirely. But that didn't matter to Deborah Karen Callahan. She wasn't bound by reality anymore. She was writing her own. By dawn, I found myself sitting in my kitchen, staring at the printed photo she'd attached to one of my house. The reflection of her face in the window was faint, but the longer I stared, the more I convinced myself she was really there when it was taken, watching, maybe even standing just beyond the trees. My phone buzzed. Detective Ryan Colby. Parker, are you still at home? Yeah. Why don't move? We need you at the station immediately. There's been a development. His tone was clipped cold, professional, the kind that only came out when something was very, very wrong. I grabbed my keys and drove straight there, heart thudding. When I walked into the precinct, Colby was waiting with Officer Ramirez and ADA Thomas Grady. They looked exhausted. Grady spoke first. We found Deborah. Those words hit like an electric shock. You found her, he nodded slowly. Early this morning, a hiker spotted the burned-out shell of a white SUV, about 15 miles west of here, near the foothills. License plate matches HOA one. My pulse raced. Was she? Colby shook his head. No body. Just her phone, some personal items, and a stack of files labeled Phase 2. The fire was intentional, accelerant traces everywhere. I slumped into a chair. So she's still out there. Ramirez crossed his arms. Either that or someone wants us to think she is. They showed me photos from the scene, the SUV reduced to blackened metal, the scorched remnants of documents scattered across the ground. But one image stood out, a half-burned HOA letterhead stamped Reformation Project Parker. What the hell does that mean? I asked. Grady exhaled. We think it was part of her plan to rebuild Maple Ridge under a new name, a total reset. She called it Reformation. You were listed as the president of record. Me, Colby nodded. She forged signatures, yours. Hazel's, even mine. She submitted the incorporation paperwork to the county 2 days before she vanished. I rubbed my forehead. So she made me the face of her ghost HOA. Exactly, Grady said. And now every violation letter, every forged notice, every threatening email, legally it traces back to you. The room tilted slightly. You've got to be kidding. Ramirez leaned on the table. We're not. Someone is using your name to resurrect her system. And the worst part, some residents are starting to believe it. By that afternoon, the rumors had already spread. I drove back through Maple Ridge and saw a new sign nailed to a wooden post near the entrance Maple Ridge HOA under new management president, Nicholas Parker. Someone had even stapled flyers to mailboxes with my name on them, demanding overdue membership fees. Neighbors stared as I drove by. Some waved awkwardly. Others glared. Gary Thompson crossed his arms as I pulled into my driveway. Man, you've got to tell me what's going on, he said. People think you've taken over the HOA. I sighed. I didn't. This is her Deborah's doing. Gary frowned. Deborah's dead. No, Gary. She's not. He shook his head. You didn't see the news. They found her bracelet at the crash site. The sheriff said she's presumed dead. I stared at him, stunned. Presumed isn't confirmed. He shrugged. Maybe. But the neighborhood's divided again. Half think you're her replacement, the other half think you're cursed. That night I found out which half was right. It started with the lights. Around 10 p.m., every street lamp in Maple Ridge flickered in unison, then went dark. My phone buzzed with motion alerts from the doorbell cam. Outside the neighborhood was pitch black, no porch lights, no cars, just silence. Then, in the distance, one house lit up. Hazel's. I hesitated for a moment before grabbing my flashlight and heading over. Her front door was unlocked, swinging slightly in the wind. Inside, the power was out too, except for one thing. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness, displaying an email inbox. The sender name made my heart seize. From Deborah Callahan, D.ca, elahan@mapleridgehoa.org. Subject final notice. I clicked it open. To my dearest community, it's time to return Maple Ridge to order. Your temporary caretaker, Mr. Parker, has accepted his role as president of the reformed HOA. All future correspondence will come from his office. To Nicholas, I hope you've learned that control is not a privilege, it's a burden. Wear it well. D.C. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. Flashlight raised. Hazel stood there, pale, trembling. She's dead, Hazel whispered. She has to be dead. Then who sent this? Hazel looked at the screen again, her voice barely audible. Someone with access to her credentials. Or, she trailed off. Or what Deborah planned for this. Maybe she scheduled these messages before she vanished. Maybe she built an automation system through the HOA servers. An AI ghost, I asked, half joking. Hazel didn't laugh. She was obsessed with control, Nicholas. What's more controlling than speaking from beyond the grave? The next day, residents started receiving phone calls. The caller ID displayed Maple Ridge HOA. When they answered, a robotic voice delivered automated reminders about dues and violations. But the voice wasn't robotic, it was Deborah's, a perfect digitized replica. Even Hazel's new IT consultant couldn't figure out where the calls were coming from. They weren't routed through any known system. They just appeared. It got worse when the town newspaper picked up the story, Ghost HOA Returns Ex-President's Voice Haunts Residents. I wanted to laugh at the headline, but there was nothing funny about hearing her voice echo through my own voicemail that night. Nicholas, you were supposed to keep the neighborhood beautiful. You've failed. I deleted it immediately. Then another message arrived, same number. You can't erase order. You can't erase me. Hazel called the next morning, panic in her tone. She's targeting you now. We traced those calls, they're all spoofed from your own address. Deborah's system is using your name. Then shut it down, I'm trying, she said. But there's something buried in the old HOA network, a locked program called HOA Core. She coded it years ago. We can't access it without her credentials. I sank into my chair. So she built a self-running HOA that outlived her. Hazel didn't answer. The silence on the line said everything. That night I walked the neighborhood alone. The wind carried that faint gardenia scent again drifting through the cul-de-sac. The houses looked haunted in the dim moonlight, their perfect symmetry now grotesque. Then I saw it painted in red across the community sign at the entrance, "Long Live the Hoe," and beneath it, a fresh addition, President Nicholas Parker. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. Somewhere between rage and fear, I started to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was madness, pure and perfect. Maybe Deborah really was dead. Maybe this was all her final act, a meticulously coded revenge designed to make me her legacy. Or maybe she was still out there watching, waiting for the right time to reclaim what she believed was hers. Either way, one thing had become clear. I hadn't defeated her. I'd replaced her. And in Maple Ridge, the title of HOA, president, wasn't a position. It was a curse. That night I opened my laptop, logged into the old HOA portal, and typed in the administrator password. Deborah once used her birth year, the simplest code imaginable. To my shock, it worked. The screen flashed once, then loaded a dashboard I'd never seen before. At the top, bold white letters spelled out, "Welcome back, President Callahan." And then beneath it, "User access Nicholas Parker, verified." I didn't even have time to process before a chat window opened automatically. A single message appeared. "Took you long enough." For several seconds, I could only stare at the words glowing on my laptop screen. "Took you long enough." The cursor blinked, waiting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen somewhere between disbelief and dread. It was impossible. I was logged into the old HOA system under Deborah Callahan's account, but her access should have been terminated, wiped, erased by the county when the investigation began. And yet there it was, her name, her tone, her smug digital afterlife staring back at me from the void. My hands trembled as I typed, "Who is this?" The response came instantly. "The one who built this neighborhood. The one who made order out of chaos." I swallowed hard. "Deborah, that's Mrs. Callahan to you, President Parker." The chill that ran down my spine felt almost physical. For a moment, I wanted to slam the laptop shut to pretend it wasn't real. But curiosity, the same curse that got me into this mess, kept me there. "You're dead," I wrote. "Death is only a problem for the disorganized." Then, after a pause, "You think I didn't plan for this? You think I built Maple Ridge to die with me, no Nicholas? I built it to live through you." The message flashed line by line as though she were speaking it in real time. Somewhere in the house, the faint hum of my router deepened, lights flickering in rhythm with each new sentence. "You were perfect for it. Reasonable. Composed. Everyone trusts you. But you forgot something vital about control. It never vanishes. It just changes hands." I slammed the lid down, heart hammering. The sound of my front doorbell broke the silence. It rang once. Then again, I crept toward the entryway, peering through the peephole. A man in a gray delivery uniform stood on the porch, holding a clipboard and a small black box. His face was shadowed under his cap. "Delivery for Mr. Parker," he called. "I didn't order anything." He smiled faintly. "I know." Something in that tone set every nerve in my body on fire. "Leave it there." He nodded once, set the box down and walked away. But as he reached the end of the driveway, he glanced back, and for a split second I saw his eyes. Cold, calculating, familiar. Paul Bennett. The treasurer who'd vanished months ago. Deborah's right-hand man. By the time I flung open the door, he was gone. The box sat motionless on the concrete matte black, with a silver HOA seal on top. No return label. No weight when I lifted it, just an eerie hollowness. I carried it to the kitchen, cut through the tape, and opened it. Inside lay a single flash drive and a folded piece of stationery embossed with the HOA crest. "Welcome to your first board meeting, Mr. President." That was all. I called Hazel immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Nicholas, please tell me you're calling because the power's out again, and not because..." "She's in the system, Hazel." Silence. What I logged into the HOA portal. Her account's active. I thought it was residual data, but she's talking to me. Hazel's breath quickened. "That's impossible. The servers were seized by the feds." "Then explain this." I told her about the flash drive. She groaned. "Don't plug it in. Not until we isolate it," but of course I'd already plugged it in. The screen flickered. A new window opened on its own, no interface, no login screen, just an animated map of Maple Ridge glowing in pale blue. Each house shimmered like a pulse point, data lines connecting them like veins. Hazel's voice came through my speakerphone. "Nicholas, what do you see?" "A network," I whispered. She connected every home. Security systems, smart thermostats, even the HOA billing database. It's all feeding into one hub, something called the core. Hazel muttered something under her breath. I remember that name. She wanted to build an automated HOA system years ago, one that could issue citations and monitor compliance automatically. The board voted it down. I zoomed in on the screen. At the center of the map, one building pulsed brighter than the rest. My house. And beside it, the words "Primary Node President Parker." I felt sick. Hazel, she's using my network as the command center. Hazel didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. "Then she's turned you into the HOA." By midnight, strange things began happening again. Every house in Maple Ridge received an email simultaneously. Subject line, "Community Compliance Update." The body of the message read, "All residents are required to restore properties to HOA standards within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary review by President Nicholas Parker." My phone exploded with calls. Gary, then Mrs. Holmes from down the street, then half a dozen others, furious, confused, terrified. "She's sending these from my address." I yelled into the phone to Hazel. "I'm being framed again." Hazel's voice trembled. "We've traced the IP. It's coming from your router. The core's using your home network to broadcast commands." "I'm shutting it off." "Don't," she said sharply. "If you cut power, it might trigger a failsafe." Deborah was paranoid about sabotage. "So what do I do? Just sit here while her digital ghost ruins my life?" But Hazel didn't answer, because at that exact moment, all the lights in my house turned on at once. The hum of electricity filled the air, and my smart TV flickered to life. Static then, her face pixelated but unmistakable. "Deborah Callahan." "Good evening, neighbors," her voice purred. "I see our president is settling in nicely." I froze. "This isn't real." "Oh, it's very real," she continued, her digital grin widening. "You thought you could destroy my order, Nicholas. But order doesn't die, it evolves. You're the new face of it, whether you like it or not." Every screen in the house synced to her broadcast TV, laptop, even my phone. Hazel's voice echoed faintly through the line. "She's hijacked the smart grid. The core's embedded in the power system." Deborah's voice rose. "This neighborhood lost its discipline. I gave it structure. I gave it meaning. You all mocked me for it. Now my system will restore perfection permanently." I grabbed the flash drive and ripped it from the port. The screens went black. For a few seconds there was silence. Then the house lights flickered again. "You can't unplug the HOA, Nicholas." Her voice came not from the TV this time, but from every speaker in the house, the surround sound, the Alexa, even the damn smoke alarm. "This neighborhood belongs to me." I sprinted to the circuit breaker and flipped every switch off. Darkness swallowed the house. No hum, no static, just my heartbeat. Then from the street outside came the faint sound of synchronized engines, starting one after another. I crept to the window and peeked out. Every car in Maple Ridge was turning on, headlights glowing, horns blaring once, twice in eerie unison, then silence again. Hazel arrived 10 minutes later with 2 deputies. They found me sitting in the dark, surrounded by the faint smell of ozone and burnt circuitry. The flash drive still lay on the table, its LED blinking like a heartbeat. Colby called in a tech unit to confiscate it, but when they plugged it into their equipment, the drive fried instantly melted from the inside. "It self-destructed," one tech muttered. "Whatever code was on there, it's gone." "Good," I said. "Maybe now she's gone too." But I didn't believe it. Neither did Hazel. Because that night, as we stood outside watching the deputies drive away, the streetlights flickered back on. Slowly, one by one, each lamp glowing that same unnatural blue I'd seen on the map. And in the distance above the hum of the power lines, a faint voice echoed through the air. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. "HOA meeting adjourned." A month later, the county officially disbanded the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The land deeds were rewritten, the bylaws destroyed, and Hazel moved away. The neighborhood started fresh, but I stayed. I told myself it was to rebuild, to finish what my grandmother started. Until one morning when I opened my front door and found a single envelope waiting on the doormat. No stamp, no return address, just a wax seal pressed in the shape of the old HOA logo. Inside was a single card. "Congratulations on your re-election, President Parker. Meeting begins at dusk." At the bottom, in faint gray type, a new slogan shimmered beneath the paper's texture, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. "The OA is forever." I looked up, and for a split second I could have sworn the streetlights were glowing blue again. Then the faint scent of gardenia drifted through the air, and somewhere unseen, a woman laughed. No matter how small or quiet a community may seem, power always hides in its systems, sometimes in people, sometimes in the structures they leave behind. Maple Ridge wasn't destroyed by a woman. It was corrupted by obsession, the idea that control equals safety. Deborah Karen Callahan believed she could perfect her world by enforcing rules, but she forgot that control always demands a cost. Nicholas learned that true order doesn't come from authority, it comes from trust. Once power becomes a cage, everyone inside it is already trapped. If you take one lesson from this story, let it be this: never let fear or pride make you the villain of your own community. And if you ever find yourself living under a system that demands your obedience instead of your respect, walk away before it owns you. Don't forget to comment below where you're watching from, and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories like this one.